Welcome to She Built That with Julie Burt Nichols, where I interview female founders about their journeys to business success. Today is a very special episode. My guest is Ann Tennes, mayor of the village of Skokie, Illinois, since April 2025. Ann is Skokie's 17th mayor and second woman mayor. Ann was Skokie's Director of Marketing and Communications for 25 years before retiring and deciding to run for office. Ann also served as a trustee on the Board of Oakton College. Ann, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is fun.
I am so excited to have you.
Really, I had some of my new mayoral artwork behind me. You can't see it. I do have a wall that is this way that used to have, under the prior administration, had old, historic photos of Skokie. And when I took office in April, it was time for just an inexpensive, modest refresh of the office. Certainly not going to spend taxpayer dollars on expensive things. But so the office was painted, and I have a wall of children's art. I have artwork from children in Skokie. And in fact, a young neighbor of mine yesterday hand-delivered two beautiful pieces of artwork to my home. One is it's just out of camera shot, but it's a little globe she made out of some kind of clay. It's a bouncy world, colorful world globe. And then she made me a beautiful picture with a rainbow that said, "We're in this together."
Okay, can you please hang that on the wall behind your head?
Well, actually, the wall behind my head is going to be a piece of art from my brother, who lives in Zurich, Switzerland. And he's a photographer, and he's working on that for me. So
I love it, because I would just love that for you whenever you're on a Zoom or you're doing another interview like this, because you're a big shot. You're going to have an awesome background.
Not a big shot. Just here to serve.
Oh, Ann, you're the best. Okay, everybody. So Ann and I met, I want to say it was about a year ago. I was being, me, I'm the marketing queen. And so I'm always like, how do I connect with more people? How do I make more contacts? And I was a member of the Skokie Chamber of Commerce. And I literally was just searching through their database of members, anybody who was related to anything having to do with marketing. And Ann's name came up. And I was like, why not? I'm just going to shoot her an email. And Ann wrote me back almost immediately and was like, yes, let's go out to lunch. And I was like, I love lunch. So we went to Alexander's in Skokie for anybody who's local. And we had the best lunch. And Ann, by the end of the conversation, she's like, so I have to tell you something. I am running for the mayor of Skokie. And I almost lost my mind. I was like, yes, girl, I love this for you so much. I was born and raised in Skokie, and that just made me so happy. We have had a male mayor for many, many years, the same mayor. And I was just so pumped to hear that Ann was going to go for it. And guess what? She got it. Ann won the seat, and she was sworn in April. And it's the story. You're going to hear about the story, everybody. But that's how Ann and I connected at first. And I'm like, you're my friend, right? But I'm really honored to have you on the show. And not only because you're so incredible and that Skokie is a big deal. Like, people know Skokie all over the world because
all roads lead to Skokie.
The Nazis tried to march in Skokie. There was a whole TV movie of the week about it back in the 80s. And, Google Skokie, guys, if you've never heard of it. But it's a pretty big deal in the Chicago area. And so to become the mayor of this town it's a pretty big deal. So, Ann, I can't wait to hear more about how you kind of went through your experience with being a marketing director and a mom, and then choosing to do this. But first, I just want to really emphasize to those of you listening at home who have any interest in local government, this episode is for you. So this is my little piece of, let's inspire some more women to run for office, shall we? So, Ann, I would love to go back in time and to hear from you about how you got started, working with the Village of Skokie, how that came about, and tell us about your experience as their marketing and communications director.
Sure. Well, thank you, Julie. Again, it's so fun to be on here with you. So my path to Skokie started in 1992. I was in my second municipal job. Never thought. I took marketing and communications classes at Columbia College. Was about to start in a master's program at Roosevelt. But so I was in my second municipal job, which was being the assistant executive director of a regional government agency, the acronym for which is SWANK, the Solid Waste Agency of Northern Cook County. Again, this was in 1992. As SWANK's, I was first hired as the community engagement director, and then again went on to be assistant executive director. But then mayor, or he wasn't even a mayor at the time, Skokie trustee George Van Duzen, and then Skokie village manager Al Rigoni, both served. Well, Al was on SWANK's executive committee, and George was the vice chair of SWANK's board. A lovely, phenomenal woman mayor, Sheila Schultz, from the village of Wheeling. May she rest in peace. But I mentioned Sheila when the night I was sworn in, because I stand on her and other former women mayor shoulders. But Sheila was the chair of the board, and George was vice chair. So I saw George Van Duzen and Al Rigoni at least twice a month for 6 years at executive committee meetings and board meetings. And I then started grad school, and I was at Roosevelt University studying, working towards a Master of Public Administration. And Al Rigoni became my go-to manager. Whenever there was a project that I had to interview a village manager, everybody would be like, oh, talk to Rigoni, he's the best. So Al and I developed a friendship. And in 1998, I got a letter from Al in the office one day saying, Al, we've created a brand new position of a director of marketing and communications. If you have any interest, let's talk. So I thought, well, my daughter was 2. I loved SWANK, but I thought maybe there could be some different opportunities in Skokie. And my husband had grown up in Skokie. So there was that. So the rest is history. I was hired as Skokie's very first director of marketing and communications in October of 1998. Worked for Al Rigoni, who remains a dear, dear mentor and friend. He taught me everything I know. Al Rigoni taught me everything I know. And Al retired in 2013, and then I worked for John Lockerbie, who is still Skokie's village manager. I retired in 2023. I was 65. It was time. I had my eye on doing some consulting. But I also, while I was on staff with Skokie, I finished up my master's degree, so I had that Master of Public Administration. But public service was always in my blood. My father modeled that for me by serving on school boards and things in Des Plaines, where I grew up. So my husband and I at the time, we lived in Park Ridge. I served on and ultimately chaired the Zoning Board of Appeals in Park Ridge. And then I decided to run for the Board of Oakton College. I reference Columbia College as my alma mater, but I started taking college classes at Oakton. And that's where I met my husband, Howard, 44 years ago. We met in a journalism class at Oakton. We just celebrated our 39th wedding anniversary.
Oh, mazel tov.
Very near and dear to my heart. So I ran for and served 2 6-year terms on the Board of Oakton College. And so that was in my blood. I opted not to run for what would have been a third 6-year term in 2019. Went through the pandemic. I'm telling you, being the communications director of a municipality, every month was like a dog year during the pandemic.
Oh my God. I didn't even realize that, of course, that would be what you were doing during the pandemic.
From the second Saturday in March of 2020 through July 3rd of that year, I worked 7 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day from my kitchen table, running village communications. I mean, and then I did it again in the early months of 2021. Skokie has one of only 4 state certified health departments in Illinois. So as such, we were giving our own COVID-19 vaccine, not our own, but we were administering COVID-19 vaccines. We had clinics. And a lot of my colleagues in other communities were not happy with me when we would go on group calls. They'd be like, Ann, all we hear from our residents is, well, Skokie is vaccinating their seniors. Why can't you get us vaccines? So anyway, I retired in 2023, launched a successful municipal consulting practice where I worked with small and large municipalities, actually all over the country, on some recruitment, some just communication strategy, community engagement, and I really enjoyed that. But things were changing in Skokie. Howard and I had moved to Skokie in 2010, and he was excited to move back to Skokie. I was excited for a simpler life, to be honest. I had so many nighttime meetings, and the idea of not having to drive 20, 25 minutes to and from was exciting to me. So, again, we moved to Skokie, never looked in the rearview mirror, still have a lot of good friends in Park Ridge, and I'm friends with the mayor of Park Ridge. But when we moved to Skokie, I wasn't involved politically because I took very, very strongly the obligation of an expectation of municipal staff not to be involved with local government. So I was true to that, other than, I did serve on Oakton's board. I had run that buyout before I decided to launch my campaign. But shortly before I retired, there were some signals in the community that it was clear that there was an appetite for new leadership. George Van Dusen had been appointed mayor in 1999. I had the pleasure of working with George. He sat in this very chair not this very chair, but in this office, in this space for 26 years.
I hope you got a new chair, being the new mayor. You'd like to think.
I think this, like I said, I am all about serving the people. I have turned down a village car. I turned down health insurance. I am not about taxpayers paying. I do get a small salary, very small. It's like $35,000 a year. That's public knowledge. But for me, it's just about serving. And but anyway, I had known George, and there were just some very strong signals in the community that there was an appetite for new leadership. And as the elections were, again, I retired in 2023. It was the seed of an idea, and there are about 5 people who are claiming full credit for it. For me being mayor, there's one wonderful woman, 97-year-old Doris Liberman, who serves on the village's Fine Arts Commission. And I was staff liaison to the Fine Arts Commission. And my very last Fine Arts Commission meeting before retiring in March 2023, she took me aside and she said, Ann, dear, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I really think you should be Skokie's next mayor. Doris. Anyway, that's just one of about 5 stories of people who claim that I'm mayor because of their whispering in my ear. But I did have, but there were people who whispered in my ear. And I had that desire to continue being of service. I also at the time was serving as a volunteer on the board of the Skokie Community Foundation, which is just a wonderful, we have so many wonderful nonprofits in Skokie, but the Skokie Community Foundation is up there as really having a special place in my heart because of how it was formed and the good work that the foundation does in the community. So, but when I retired, I was serving on that board, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to launch my consulting practice, and I'm just going to give myself a year to talk to people, think about the possibility of running. And I had numerous conversations, including with you, Julie, even though our conversation didn't center on that. But by the time spring of 2024 rolled around, which was a year before the 2025 election, I thought, you know what, if not me, who? If not now, when? And my husband, Howard, was extremely supportive. And his words to me were important because he said, when I was down to kind of the final decision point, we talked about how much of our own money we would invest in the campaign. Those were important conversations for us to have. But he also said, that he would support me unequivocally, providing that I had the mindset that it was okay if I lost. Not that I wouldn't work as hard as I could to get elected, but that there had to be a dual mindset that if I lost, life would go on. And I'll tell you, I struggled with, I said, of course, I said, oh, yes, of course. I don't know that I truly came into that mindset, though, until about exactly a year ago. So I spent the summer campaigning hard, getting signatures. You know, you have to get, in order to run for office, you have to have a certain number of signatures. I garnered over 900 signatures just in the month of August of 2024. So it was a lot of knocking doors and going to events and standing on the corners of Oakton and Lincoln during the backlot bash and what have you. And I want to be clear, I didn't do it all myself. We had a team of about 25 people circulating my petitions. But exactly a year ago, I went to Europe, my first trip ever abroad.
Oh, wow.
We spent 2 weeks in Canada, but that doesn't count, right? But we spent 2 weeks in London and Ireland to arrange a rail tour of Ireland. And that break, coming off of the intensity of the summer of launching my campaign, and that break really allowed me to take a step back and get some perspective. And when we returned, I truly had this mindset that if I win, great. If I lose, that's okay too. And that was in my mind. I mean, don't get me wrong, Julie. I was wrapped up in the campaign, and I worked. It was from January, or really February, through now. I feel like I'm continuing to sprint. But the last couple of months of that campaign, and even right after I got elected, were an absolute sprint. And anyway, it worked out. I had a wonderful campaign team. I made again, through the Skokie Chamber, I was approached by a brilliant young woman, Kara Menser, who owns a consulting practice. She lives in Skokie, Call to Action Strategies. She came up to me at a chamber event in October of last year and said, I hear you, I know you're running for mayor. Have you thought about hiring a strategist? And her timing was perfect because the campaign was starting to feel like a lot. And I knew there were going to be a lot of big decision points coming up. And bringing her on board was one of the best decisions that I made. And she was terrific. But I had so many wonderful volunteers from the community. Randy Roberts, who had been a former trustee for the village of Skokie. Randy was my campaign chair. Of course, my husband, Howard, he was part of that inner circle. And Peggy Tollison, who was a trustee for Niles Township. The day that I belonged to Skokie Rotary, and Peggy came up to me. I really didn't know her that well, but she came up to me in April of 2024, shortly after I had kind of made my decision and was going public with it. And she's got this little southern lilt. And she said, Ann, I hear you're running for mayor. I would like to help you. I had no idea what a godsend that would prove to be. Peggy is an experienced campaigner. She was the one who divided up Skokie into territories and turfs, they call them, so that we could go around when the thaw happened and do some real good door knocking. And anyway, I guess maybe to bring this to a close, here's to me what really illustrated the important grassroots nature of our campaign. On the Sunday before the election, so it would have been Sunday, March 30th, we had a Zoom call at 7 o'clock that night to train volunteers who were going to work the polls for us 2 days later on Tuesday, April 1st. We had about 70 to 75 people on that call, all volunteers, all but 2 from Skokie. A friend from Park Ridge volunteered and a friend from Chicago volunteered. Everybody else volunteers from Skokie. Some folks I really didn't even know. I knew their names, but I didn't know them. By Tuesday, election day, we had over 125 volunteers.
Wow.
And people would say to their neighbors, hey, I'm going to be at Devonshire School handing out cards on election day for Ann Tennes for mayor. Would you join me? I mean, that's what happened. So it was incredible. I'm proud of myself for maintaining that equanimity in that it truly, if I won, I won. If I lost, I lost. I gave it my all. Once people started writing me checks, there was no turning back.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely no turning back. Once I took $1, actually, one of the first donations I got was from one of Skokie's former finance directors, wonderful man named George Van Geem. And George invited me to breakfast summer of 24, right before I started getting signatures. And he just slid a nice check across the table to me. He said, "Here you go, kiddo. I think you're going to need this." And it went from there.
I mean, what an incredible moment. Like that must have that. I mean, it just gives me chills hearing that story.
It was like, okay, this is really real now.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to go back and I want to hear more about what it's like running your first campaign. And like, I want to hear the stories of like the things you learned running your campaign. I would love to like get some insight on what were some of the strategies that you tried that really worked, and then maybe some strategies that didn't work, but then how did you pivot?
Sure. So, okay, I'll just tell you one thing. I mean, so running my first campaign, again, thank goodness for Peggy Tullison. And another person I have to mention is Lisa Hanley. Lisa's deceased husband, Pat Hanley, was the village's corporation counsel for many years, and I had the privilege of working with Pat. And you mentioned the threatened Nazi march in Skokie in the late 70s. Lisa's father, the Harvey Schwartz, was Skokie's village attorney during that time. Harvey, he went on to become a Cook County judge. But when Lisa helped with my campaign. So there were people who knew what they were doing. What I knew how to do was to connect with people. And in fact, Randy Roberts and I came up with a tagline, uniting Skokie, one conversation at a time. I spent from the time the campaign was launched, I actually kind of launched it officially in late May of 2024, and until February of 2025, I had more one-on-one coffees than I can count. With people a couple times. I mean, there's one individual who emailed me today to thank me for a position that I took at our board meeting last night. And I remember he was skeptical of me. He was not sure. He thought that I was too much of an insider, but now I'm his mayor, right? And he's we have a good connection, but I met with him three times, but I did that over and over and over again. And I was not supported by everyone in the village, certainly. I did end up winning by 12% of the vote, which in a three-way race is, I'm told, is remarkable.
It is.
But I had to find a lot within myself to just show up at places where I knew not everyone was going to be excited I was there.
Oh.
And I found the inner strength to do that. And I just would focus on people I wanted to speak with, whether I knew them or not, just going up and introducing myself. Tell me about you. What brought you to Skokie? How long have you lived here? What's on your mind? Starting in February, that's when the real sprint began. And again, another wonderful volunteer friend, Debbie Cohen. She was my coffee organizer. Debbie, we had I think I had between February 1st and Election Day. I'd have to go back at my calendar and look. It might be scary if I did, though. But I think I was probably at least 50 different places, here, there. I would have pop-up events. People had coffees in their homes. And just really connecting with people and telling them my vision for what I believe Skokie needs and needed. And it resonated. So here I am. I've got a lot of work ahead of me. When you mentioned the Nazi march, one of my first initiatives, and this was at the suggestion of a rabbi in Skokie, Rabbi Ari Hart, with whom I had become acquainted during the campaign. I met with him. He was actually my first in-office meeting 2 days after I was sworn in. But he suggested starting a faith leaders council. And I did. I actually did. We had our first meeting about 3 weeks ago. And I told them bluntly that to me, having this faith leaders council that is really more of a cabinet to me is, I think, an important part of emergency preparedness for our community. Skokie has a history of being a lightning rod for hate, and we're in unsettled times certainly now, but I think having clergy of all faiths at the ready to stand together in the face of any affront to our community is super important. I guess the other thing, Julie, to go back though, you asked me a question about running a campaign. One of the things, and my guess is that other folks you've interviewed have said similar things, no matter what their work or professional endeavors are. But I made a real commitment to taking care of myself. Now, the one piece that was hard, especially in February, March, was sleep. Sleep was hard. But I developed some workarounds. But in the last 4 years, leading up to retirement, and certainly during my brief stint as a retiree, I developed a regular meditation practice. If you had told me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that I would have a regular meditation practice, I never would have believed it. But
this is very relatable to me right now.
I downloaded an app, the Daily Calm. If you're interested, I'll send you a guest pass for 30 days.
Yes, please. I will need that. Thank you.
It's not expensive. It's like $70 a year, I think. But I meditate every day between minimum of 5 minutes. And you know what? If I miss a day, it's not the end of the world. But I would say in the last year, 360 days, I have meditated to up to 20 minutes a day using a guided meditation app. It has made such a difference. And there were times during the thick of the campaign, I would meditate twice a day. I would meditate in the morning. I'd go out and do what I had to do. And I would then meditate before I had to go off and do whatever I was doing in the evening. I ate clean. I am a vegan. I follow a vegan diet, so I was true to that. I tried to eat clean. I journal. I journaled during my entire campaign. I've fallen away from that a little bit, although I've been writing a little bit the last week. So I took care of myself, and I had some absolutes that I would absolutely take care of myself. You talked about a pivot. And here's one. It's kind of a small one, but it's the one that comes to mind. So early voting started on St. Patrick's Day, which I'm an Irish girl. So my maiden name was Riley. So I took that as a very, very good luck charm. And early voting, I would be there. I would be at early voting, greeting voters. For whatever reason, I found that exhausting and triggering because there were other candidates there. And it was kind of Wild West. And not that anything bad ever happened. Certainly, I'm now friendly with both of my opponents. I've developed friendships and, collegial relationships with both of them, which was important to me. But I just decided, you know what? This is not a good use of my time. And not that it wasn't a good use of my time, but I had volunteers that were going to do it. I thought, you know what? My time was better spent knocking on doors. And then these coffees, I would go to these every night just about. Someone opened their home for a candidate coffee. And there would be, I think the smallest one I ever went to, it was the weekend of the water main break in Skokie.
Oh, gosh.
This host, she wanted to forge ahead. So it was her and two neighbors. We drank bottled water. It worked out. But the largest, I think there was one that had 75 people.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So I decided that my energy, I recognized that I had limited energy.
Yeah.
And I had to decide where that energy was best spent. So I think that was the lesson. I also really only focused on what was in front of me. I tried super hard because there was, it was the first contested election for the mayor in Skokie in years, decades, and 60 plus years, as I recall. And there was some fur that flew around, right? There was, but I just decided to be true to myself, focus on my values, and what did I need to do next? What color was I going to wear to my next coffee? Not that simplistic, but I really tried to just keep my head down and focus on what was next.
I mean,
And
I was going to ask you because, you know, my parents live in Skokie. And so they, you know, would call me and they'd be like, we're so worried about Ann because there's all these ads on TV for her opponent. And they're just like running these ads like so frequently. Like, does she even have a chance? So, like, the perception out there in the town of like, you know, how is Ann doing? Like, do you guys ever, like, do you have any polling numbers? Like, how does that even work? How did you even stay focused during that time?
well, we had a plan, and the plan that worked was to connect with voters one-on-one and in personal settings. And we were outspent by a significant margin. I mean, significant. But the community saw the message resonated with the community, and it wasn't in the end, signs didn't equal votes. They didn't, and the community wanted a change. And what I represented and I was clear about was that I would listen. And I've told people, I mean, I made a tough decision at a board meeting a couple weeks ago, and there are some people who supported me who are unhappy with me about it. And what I've told them is, you're not going to like every decision I make. You're just not. But you have to know that I will look at all the facts, and I will make what I believe is the very best decision for the village of Skokie. And the thing is, I will always listen. My door will always be open. At the end of the day, we're not going to always agree, but I will always listen. And that, so I was clear to people that I knew enough about the inside to know what needed to change and things that needed to be looked at, and I'm working on those now. But I wasn't going to just implement change for change sake. There's some things that do work well.
Yeah.
And,
now, looking back, was there anything that really surprised you in running for office for the first time? Was there something that maybe you had like no idea was going to happen? I mean, I only have the perception of, you know, people running for office on like Parks and Recreation or Scandal. So, you know, which is a little skewed, I would say. But what were the surprising things to you?
Well, I guess my head goes a few different places. So one of the things that I learned that I was surprised by, my attorney, it took me a while to find an attorney because a lot of attorneys were already connected to different candidates and folks who were supporting different candidates. But I finally found a really good one. And on election night, he texted me and he said, congratulations, you're not going to need my services tonight. If it had been close or contested, I maybe would have had to call him, but it wasn't. And he said, and I texted him, thank you. And the next day I sent him a little longer text, and he said he wasn't surprised. He said I was always 2 steps ahead of all of his other clients. So that surprised, because I just, like my husband Howard and I went down, we took those 900 signatures that I gathered during August of last year. We went to the Cook County Board of Elections database center in Cicero. We spent a day and a half there actually comparing signatures that were on the papers we had to the online signatures of voters, because I wanted to make sure that my petitions were absolutely as buttoned up that could not be contested, and they weren't. So it just, like, I thought every candidate would do that, but we did. Another thing that surprised me, and it was a tough surprise, but it all worked out. The League of Women Voters had scheduled a candidate forum, not only for the mayoral race, but for the village clerk's race. There were 3 candidates, and for the various trustee races, most of which were contested. And I was, I responded right away. I said, yes, I'm in. It was going to be in February. And neither of my opponents would agree to participate. They had their reasons. And what I learned was that the League of Women Voters will not hold a single seat forum. So even though I said yes, and I was willing to sit up on that stage and field questions by myself, they said, no, we will not. Their charter, and I tried every which way to get them to make an exception, but they wouldn't. And I understand, and it worked out okay. So we just redoubled our efforts to connect with the community. Another thing that surprised me along the way, and one thing I want to talk about that has surprised me since I've been in office, but one thing that surprised me was as I was talking to residents, I had my platform. I knew what some of the hot button issues were going to be, and I addressed them and gave them my platform. I didn't realize how important traffic safety in neighborhoods. I mean, I knew it was important because I dealt with that when I was communications director, but I'm telling you, people have strong opinions and thoughts about how traffic safety needs to be in their neighborhoods. And you know what? I've heard them and I'm hearing them, and I'm working hard to make that a priority, as are the other trustees. We are, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we have launched our first ever strategic plan in Skokie. I'm very proud of that. That was at the top of, no, Skokie had never had a strategic
First ever?
plan. Ever. And that was part of the work that I did as a consultant. I led a strategic plan for a large regional government, co-led for a large regional government agency and for a municipality in the western suburbs. And I knew we absolutely need a strategic plan, because with this strategic, right now we're in the community engagement phase. There's an online survey. There are focus groups that people can sign up for. There's going to be a large community vision session at, I think it's at Niles West. I forget it's it. I won't be there. The electeds, we're not allowed to go. We don't want our presence to have any kind of an effect on what people tell our consultants are their priorities. But at the end of the day, Julie, what this data that we're gathering from the community is going to be, the board is going to consider it, and it will help shape our priorities. Where do we allocate our human and fiscal resources over the next several years that's in alignment with what the community wants? I can guess that downtown Skokie is going to be on that list. I can guess that traffic safety. I can guess that public safety. But I don't want to guess. I want the community to tell us. And so I'm very excited about that.
Have you hosted your first public forum yet?
No, and we have public forums every 2 weeks at our village board meetings. I'm super proud of the change that I've made. And I say it's a team. The village board is a team, and the village manager and his staff are, really important components of that team, as is our corporation council. But we've changed the way that public comments are facilitated and held at village board meetings. It used to be that public comments were always the very last item on the agenda right before adjournment. And that never felt right to me. I always believed that it was a disservice for people to have to wait until the end of a meeting if there was something that was important for them to tell their elected officials. So we started now. We allocate up to 30 minutes near the beginning of the agenda, usually within about the first 30 minutes. And we allocate up to 30 minutes. Speakers I'm a rule follower, Julie. People are timed to 3 minutes. And so we're making that wasn't always standard practice, and I think it needs to be. I believe it needs to be. So up to 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. So that's 10 speakers. When there's an action item that we'll be voting on that night, when we get to that agenda item, up to 5 speakers for 3 minutes each. And at the end, up to 10 speakers for 3 minutes each. So we have public forums on the first and third Mondays of every month. So
that's awesome.
Exciting. I am out in the community a lot. What I was going to tell you surprised me. Children are so excited to meet me. It's like you think they were meeting,
Santa Claus.
I don't know who. It's anyway. But
Hanukkah Harry.
That brings me joy. That brings me tremendous.
That's wonderful.
A source of tremendous joy.
And our time is coming to a close, but I have one more question for you, which is, if you were to meet a woman who is interested in running for public office but doesn't know where to start, what advice would you give her?
I would tell her to talk to some other women who are in office. Certainly she's not going to talk to someone she's going to run against, perhaps, but try to find some other connections, maybe on a school board, maybe on, I would encourage them to talk to other women who have run for office. But I would also say, Julie, I could not have run for office when my daughter was young. I could have, and I did. I ran for Oakton's board, but that was different. It was a different level of service, important service, but different than this. But I also think it's important for women, if you think sometime in the future you might want to, get on that volunteer board. Maybe think about running for school board. There are steps along the way that can help you build a body of work and inform your knowledge about running for whatever office you ultimately, would aspire to. But it can also tell you, you know what, maybe you don't want to run. Maybe, maybe there's something different you'd like to do. Maybe being chair of a nonprofit or just being involved in a nonprofit. So I think it's important to keep in mind that there are lots of ways and important ways to be of service. And being of service locally is, I think, a special gift from an individual to their community.
I agree wholeheartedly. And thank you so much for being on my show. I am so excited to see what the future holds for you. You're just at the beginning of this journey as mayor of Skokie, and I am just delighted every time I see you in the news. And I'm like, yes, Ann is doing it. She's making a difference, and she's making our area a better place to be. So thank you on behalf of the town, Niles Township, wherever, everybody who lives in Skokie, thank you very much for your service.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's my honor and my pleasure. Thank you so much, Julie.
I'm just delighted to have you. And thank you all for listening. I am Julie Burt Nichols. This is She Built That with Julie Burt Nichols. I am a marketer, and I do marketing for small businesses. So if you need some help with your marketing, with figuring out how to talk about your business, figuring out how to do social media, I am your gal. You can find me at julienicholsmarketing.com. That's NICHOLS marketing.com. And that's all. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.